Hello and welcome to The Explainer. So, you've probably heard all the buzzwords like Web3, Bitcoin, blockchain get thrown around a lot. And honestly, it can feel like you're trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. I get it. There's a ton of hype and maybe even more confusion. But hang with me for the next 5 minutes because we're going to connect those dots and make it all make sense. First up, let's start with a simple question. Just think about the last photo you posted online. Maybe on Instagram or Facebook, you took it, you uploaded it. Pretty straightforward, right? But who actually owns that photo once it's out there? The answer is, well, it's not as simple as you'd think, and it gets right to the heart of what we're talking about today. Here's the deal. On the internet we all use today, the platform owns it. Yep. Big corporations like Meta or Google, they control the whole playground. And when they control the platform, guess what? They control the data. Your data, your photos, your posts. They can be used for their benefit or even just disappear without you having any say in it. This whole model where we do the creating and they do the controlling, that's Web 2. Okay, so to really get where the internet might be going, we have to be super clear on where we are right now. Let's dig into the internet we all know and use every day. An internet that, as you're about to see, was built to be centralized from the get-go. You can kind of break the internet story into two big chapters so far. First, you had Web 1. Think back to the 90s. It was the read-only web. We were basically just consumers, looking at static web pages. Then, along came Web 2, the read-write web, and bam, suddenly we were all creators. We were blogging, sharing, posting our lives online. But here's the catch. All that amazing creativity happened inside these walled gardens. These centralized platforms that took ownership of our data in exchange for their free service. So if Web 2 is all about platforms being in control, how in the world do you build something different? Well, the big breakthrough didn't come from some social media company. Nope. It came from the world of finance. It was this radical idea that suggested a new way to trust each other. One that didn't need a powerful company sitting in the middle. In 2008, this sentence pops up online, written by this mysterious person or group called Satoshi Nakamoto. Now, it sounds pretty simple, right? But this was the idea that launched Bitcoin, and it totally changed the game. At its core, it was trying to solve one single problem: trust. How can two total strangers online send money to each other and both know, for sure, that the transaction is legit, without needing a big bank to approve it? And the answer to that question was a new kind of technology called blockchain. Now, the magic is right there in the definition. First, it's distributed. That just means the record book isn't kept in one single place. It's copied and shared across thousands of computers, so no one person or company is in charge. Second, it's immutable. That's a fancy word that means once a transaction is locked in, it's sealed with fancy math, cryptography, and it can't be changed. Ever. This creates trust, not in a company, but in the code itself. So how does this actually play out? You can think of it like a 4-step dance. Step 1, someone requests a transaction. Step 2, that request gets bundled up with a bunch of others into a new block. Step 3, the entire network of computers double-checks the block to make sure everything is valid. And finally, step 4, once they all agree, that block gets changed to the one before it forever. What you get is a secure, transparent, public history that's built, well, block by block. And, this idea didn't just appear out of thin air. Way back in 1991, cryptographers were already writing about these secured chains of blocks. But it was Satoshi's Bitcoin white paper in 2008 that really lit the match. By 2010, it got real, with maybe the most legendary purchase in internet history: 10,000 Bitcoins for 2 pizzas. Wild. Then, fast forward to 2014, and an Ethereum co-founder named Gavin Wood gives this whole movement a name: Web 3. He called it a vision for a more trustworthy, post-Snowden internet. All right, so Bitcoin proved that a decentralized ledger could work for one specific thing: digital money. But this next part of the story asks an even bigger question. What if you could use that same idea, that same ledger, to do, well, pretty much anything? And that is the absolute key difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum. Think of it like this. If Bitcoin is a calculator, perfectly designed to do one thing really well, then Ethereum is like a smartphone. It took that core blockchain idea and made it programmable. It lets developers build what are called smart contracts, which are basically self-executing programs, and whole decentralized applications, or dApps. This is where it gets really interesting. Don't think of Ethereum as just one app. Think of it more like an operating system, like Windows or iOS, but for a whole new internet. You can see here how developers can build layers of applications right on top of it. Apps for finance, for art, for gaming, you name it. And they're all running on that same shared, secure, decentralized foundation. It's a whole ecosystem. Which brings us right back to where we started, and to the number one takeaway of this whole thing. Web 1 was read, Web 2 was read-write, Web 3 introduces the final and most revolutionary piece of the puzzle, read, write, own. And that's not just some marketing buzzword, it's the whole point. By using the blockchain, you can have true, verifiable ownership of your digital life, your data, your assets. It's not just a license to use someone else's platform, it's actually yours. And this is a big but, this amazing vision of a user-owned internet is still very much under construction. It's so important to separate the hype from the reality on the ground, because the path forward is, let's just say, full of some pretty big challenges. Okay, one of the biggest criticisms, and it's a fair one, is captured perfectly by this analogy from the investor Chris Dixon. He says that right now Web3 often feels more like a financial casino than a useful computer. The insane hype and speculation around the price of crypto tokens has often totally overshadowed the mission of building practical apps that people can actually use to solve real problems. And those hurdles are no joke. On the tech side, the networks can be really slow and expensive to use. And let's be honest, the user experience is often super clunky and confusing for anyone who isn't a total nerd. Then you have the huge outside pressures. Governments are still trying to figure out the rules, security is a massive issue, and the real irony? A lot of so-called decentralized apps are still quietly relying on the same old centralized services, like Amazon Web Services, that they claim they're here to replace. So, with all that baggage, is this whole thing just a fantasy for tech geeks? Or is there something real starting to grow here? To wrap up, let's look at where Web3 might actually be making a difference, far away from all the noise and the hype. Even with all the challenges, the seeds of this new internet are definitely being planted. In fact, one report found over 150 projects in Latin America alone that are already using Web3 tools to solve actual local problems. For example, check out this platform called Cambiatus in Costa Rica. The co-founder, Carlo Cordoba, says they use Web3 to let local communities literally create their own digital money. This helps them build up their own local economies and fund projects that matter to them directly without needing to ask for permission from some big bank or government. It's a really powerful grassroots example of what decentralization can look like in action. And this really brings us to the two big competing views of what's happening. On one hand, you have people who say Web3 is just a grand, messy experiment, a niche playground for speculators and tech dreamers. On the other hand, you have people who say no, this is the next chapter. It's the inevitable shift to an internet that's finally owned and governed by the people who use it. And that, right there, is the big question. Is this the inevitable future, or is it a grand experiment still trying to find its footing? The tech is complicated for sure, and the challenges are very real. But that vision, the idea of a more fair, user-owned internet, that's a really powerful one. And now you've got the context to follow the conversation and decide for yourself what you think comes next. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.